3 months had passed since the Battle of Thesan. The Galactic Consortium Assembly was the largest gathering of intelligent species in known space. Representatives from 1,000 worlds sat in the great circular chamber, their translators humming softly as they waited for the day's speaker. They had come from every corner of the galaxy. Some had traveled for weeks to be here. Everyone wanted to hear what the Valari had to say. Commander Lrus walked to the central platform with slow, measured steps. Her 3 eyes moved across the crowd. She saw the consortium leaders who had refused to help. She saw the syndicate ambassadors who had closed their borders. She saw hundreds of species who had watched her people die and done nothing. She saw the human delegation. There were only 11 of them. The survivors of the 77th Drop Infantry sat together in a small section near the back. Private Lee Selman was in a wheelchair, her shoulder still healing. Corporal Bi Jiang stood beside her, her ribs wrapped beneath her uniform. Sergeant Kan Minho sat with his hands folded, his face calm. Lrus began to speak. For 8,000 years, the Krath Dominion has been a plague upon this galaxy. They have destroyed worlds. They have ended civilizations. They have killed trillions of people. And for 8,000 years, we have done nothing. She looked at the consortium leaders. You said it was too dangerous. You said the Krath were too powerful. You said that getting involved would only make things worse. She looked at the syndicate ambassadors. You closed your borders. You pretended that if you did not see the horror, it would not come for you. You convinced yourselves that safety meant silence. She paused. The chamber was completely quiet. My species was peaceful. We had no army. We had no weapons. We believed that the galaxy would protect us if we were ever in danger. We believed that our alliances meant something. Her voice hardened. We were wrong. She turned to face the holographic display behind her. Images began to appear. The burning cities of Thesan. The Krath soldiers cutting through civilians. The bodies piled in the streets. 12 billion Valari lived on our homeworld. 12 billion people with lives and dreams and families. When the Krath came, we asked for help. Every species in this chamber received our message. She let that sink in. Not one of you came. The images changed. A small human ship, alone against a fleet of monsters. Soldiers falling from the sky into fire. A final brilliant explosion. But the humans came. Lrus walked toward the human delegation. Every eye in the chamber followed her. They came from the other side of the galaxy. They came in a single ship with 52 crew members and 47 soldiers. They knew they were outnumbered. They knew they would probably die. They came anyway. Private Lee Soman sat up straighter in her wheelchair. Her eyes were wet, but she did not look away. I asked them why, Lrus continued. When their soldiers were dying around me, when their ship was burning in the sky above us, I asked them why they would sacrifice everything for strangers. She stopped in front of Sergeant Kang Minho. Do you remember what you told me, Sergeant? Minho stood slowly. His voice was quiet, but the translators carried it to every corner of the chamber. I told you that you called for help, and we came. Lrus nodded. That simple. That pure. You did not ask if we could pay you. You did not ask what you would gain. You did not calculate the odds or debate the politics. You simply heard people crying for help, and you answered. She turned back to the assembly. Captain Park Doyen died saving my people. He flew his ship into the heart of the enemy fleet, knowing he would never come home. 35 of his crew died with him. 35 soldiers of the 77th gave their lives on our world. The images showed their faces now. Young men and women from Earth, smiling in their official photos, laughing with friends, living their lives. These humans had families waiting for them, parents who loved them, children who needed them. They had every reason to turn back. No one would have blamed them. She looked at the consortium leaders again. But they were not like us. They did not calculate the cost and decide it was too high. They did not weigh their lives against ours and choose themselves. They looked at strangers they had never met, and they saw people worth dying for. The chamber stirred. Delegates whispered to each other. Some looked ashamed. Others looked angry. A few were crying. The Krath are withdrawing from Valari space, Lrus announced. Not because of anything we did. Not because the great powers of this galaxy finally decided to act. They withdrew because a handful of humans showed them something they had never seen before. She raised her voice. They showed them that some species will not run. Some species will not hide. Some species will look into the face of impossible odds and charge forward anyway, not because they expect to win, but because it is the right thing to do. She walked back to the central platform and faced the assembly one final time. I do not expect you to become like the humans. I do not expect you to suddenly discover courage after 8,000 years of cowardice. But I want you to remember something. She pointed at the human delegation. Those 11 soldiers are all that remain of the force that saved my people. They are wounded and tired and grieving. They watched their friends die on a world that was not their home. And when I asked them if they would do it again, knowing what it would cost, do you know what they said? The chamber waited. They said yes, without hesitation, without doubt, because that is who they are. That is what humanity means. She let the words hang in the air. The humans have changed everything, not because they are strong, not because they have great technology or vast armies, but because they have something we forgot existed. They have hearts that break for strangers. They have souls that refuse to accept evil. They have a simple, powerful belief that helping others is always worth the cost. She turned to face the humans one last time. She performed the Valari gesture of deepest respect. 3 eyes closed. Both hands pressed to her heart. Thank you, she said simply, for everything. The chamber erupted. 1,000 species were on their feet, shouting, arguing, demanding change. The comfortable silence of millennia had been shattered. Something new was beginning. After the assembly ended, Lrus found the humans outside the great hall. They were standing together, looking up at the stars. What will you do now? She asked Sergeant Kan Minho. He shrugged. Go home, heal, remember our friends. And then? He smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was real. Then we wait. Sooner or later, someone else will call for help. And when they do, we will come. Private Lee Soman wheeled herself forward. She looked at Lrus with eyes that had seen too much death. Commander, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think it mattered? What we did. Do you think it will really change anything? Lrus thought about the question. She thought about the burning cities and the dying children and the terror she had felt when she thought her species would disappear forever. She thought about a small ship flying towards certain death. She thought about soldiers carrying strangers through fire. Yes, she said finally. I think it changed everything. Soman nodded slowly. She looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, on 100 worlds, beings who had spent their lives in fear were looking up at those same stars. They were hearing stories about the humans who came. They were learning that courage was still possible. They were beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, they did not have to be alone. Lrus put her hand on someone's shoulder. Your people have given us something precious, she said. You have given us hope. Soman smiled through her tears. That is what we do, she said softly. That is what we have always done. The stars burned cold and eternal above them. But they no longer seemed quite so dark, because now the galaxy knew the truth. Humans were out there. And they would always come when called. Always. Captain Park Doyen wiped blood from his eyes and looked at what was left of his ship, thought the Indomitable was dying. 67 direct hits had torn through her hull. 34 crew members were dead. Life support had failed on 3 decks. The port engine was completely gone. The starboard engine was on fire. They were bleeding atmosphere from a dozen holes, but they were still flying. "Captain," said Lieutenant Yunhara, her face lit by the red glow of emergency lights, "the shuttle is away. They have the survivors. But the Krath fleet is moving to intercept." Don nodded slowly. He had known this moment would come. He had been preparing for it since they entered the system. How many enemy ships between the shuttle and the jump point? 47. "We cannot fight them all. No, we cannot." He looked around the bridge at his crew, bruised and bleeding, still working their stations. At the view screen, filled with Krath warships. At the small blinking dot that represented the shuttle carrying 4,000 Valari civilians and the survivors of his ground team. He had brought 52 people into this battle. 34 were dead. The 18 survivors on this bridge had families waiting for them on Earth. Parents, children, lovers, people who would never see them again. But on that shuttle, there were 4,000 people who would live because of what they had done today. The math was simple. The choice was easy. "Lieutenant Yun." "Yes, Captain?" "Plot a collision course with the Krath command ship." The bridge fell silent. Every eye turned to him. Lieutenant Yun did not move. Her hands hovered over her console, frozen. "Captain, if we do that, we cannot escape. I know. Everyone on this ship will die. I know, sir." Her voice cracked. "Sir, there must be another way." Do-hyun walked to her station and put a hand on her shoulder. She was crying now, though she would never admit it. She was the best tactical officer he had ever served with. She deserved to grow old. She deserved to see her parents again. But some choices were made for us before we were born. "Huh," he said softly, using her first name for the first time. "There is no other way. The shuttle cannot outrun those ships. If we do not stop them here, everyone on that shuttle will die. The Valari will be extinct, and our soldiers will have died for nothing. But what about us? What about our families? They will know we died well. They will know we died for something that mattered." He smiled, and there was no fear in it. "That is the best death any of us can hope for." He turned to face his crew. These brave men and women who had followed him into hell without hesitation. "This is your captain speaking. I am ordering a collision course with the Krath command ship. Anyone who wishes to object may do so now." No one spoke. "Anyone who wishes to leave may take the escape pods." No one moved. Helmsman Shin Taiwu was the first to speak. "Captain, where would we go? We are soldiers. This is where we belong." Communications Officer Kim Yuri nodded. "My grandmother always said I would die doing something stupid. I would hate to disappoint her." Engineer Bae Junho laughed through his tears. "I always wanted to make history. I guess this counts." One by one, every member of the bridge crew spoke. Some made jokes. Some cried. Some simply nodded. But not one of them asked to leave. Do-hyun felt his heart swell with pride. "Then let us give the galaxy something to remember." He opened a ship-wide communication channel. His voice echoed through every corridor, every room, every corner of the dying ship. "Attention all hands. This is your captain. In a few minutes, we are going to ram the Krath command ship. There is no escape from this. We will die." He paused, letting the words settle. "I know some of you are scared. I know some of you have family waiting at home. I know this is not how you imagined your story ending. But I want you to know something. What we did today matters. We came to a world full of strangers, and we saved them. 40,000 people will live because of us. Their children will grow up. Their stories will continue. And somewhere in the future, when people talk about the ones who cared enough to help, they will talk about us. On the shuttle, the survivors heard his voice through the communication link. Private Lee Soman stopped what she was doing. The Valari fell silent. Even the children stopped crying to listen. We are the crew of the Indomitable. We came from a small planet called Earth. We were not the strongest. We were not the most advanced. But we were brave enough to try. And today, we proved that courage matters more than power. Lieutenant Yoon was working her console now, rerouting the remaining nuclear warheads to the forward hull. If they were going to hit the enemy, they would hit them hard. So, when we go with our heads held high. We go knowing we did the right thing. We go knowing that somewhere out there, people will remember us. Do-hyun looked at the Krath command ship on the view screen. It was massive. Beautiful in a terrible way. The brain of the entire fleet. Helm, full speed ahead. The Indomitable groaned. Her damaged engine screamed. But she moved. She flew, straight toward the heart of the enemy. The Krath tried to stop them. Ships moved to block their path. Weapons fired. More holes appeared in the hull. More alarms sounded. More lights flickered and died. But the Indomitable did not stop. On the shuttle, Sergeant Kan Minho stood at the viewport and watched his ship fly toward its end. Behind him, Valari children pressed their faces against the glass, not understanding what they were seeing. "Sergeant?" said Commander Lrus. "What is happening?" "They are buying us time," Minho said quietly. "They are dying so we can live." Lrus watched the small ship grow smaller in the distance. "They are very brave. They are human." The impact came moments later. The Indomitable hit the Krath command ship at full speed. The nuclear warheads detonated on contact. For one brief, brilliant moment, a new star was born in the darkness of space. When the light faded, there was nothing left. No Indomitable. No command ship. Just debris floating in the void. On the shuttle, no one spoke. The Valari did not understand what they had witnessed. The humans did. Private Lee Soman sank to her knees. Corporal Bi Jiang turned away, her shoulders shaking. Even Sergeant Kan Minho, who had seen death 100 times, felt tears running down his face. 52 crew members. People with names and dreams and families who loved them. Gone in a flash of light, but the shuttle was safe now. The Krath fleet, without their command ship, fell into chaos. The path to the jump point was clear. On the bridge of every Krath vessel, officers asked the same question. What kind of species would do such a thing? What kind of creatures would die for strangers? They had no answer. They would learn, in time, that this was simply what humans did. They fought for those who could not fight for themselves. They gave their lives for people they had never met. They refused to accept that some things were impossible, and in doing so, they changed everything. The shuttle reached the jump point. The pilot activated the drive, and in a flash of light, they were gone. Behind them, a world burned, but on that shuttle, 4,000 Valari and 11 human survivors carried the memory of the Indomitable with them. They would make sure the galaxy never forgot. Commander Lrus heard the thunder before she saw the angels. The Krath had broken through the outer door. Their soldiers poured into the tunnels like black water, plasma size humming with deadly light. The Valari defenders, armed with tools and desperation, tried to hold them back. They died where they stood. Lrus watched her people fall. Engineers, teachers, artists, brave souls who had never held a weapon in their lives, fighting monsters that had conquered entire civilizations. It was hopeless. It was beautiful. It broke her heart. "Fall back to the inner chamber," she ordered. "Protect the children." The survivors retreated. The Krath advanced. Step by step, death came closer. and then the ceiling exploded. Light poured through the hole. Dust and debris rained down. Through the chaos, dark shapes dropped into the tunnel. They were smaller than the Krath, much smaller, but they moved with a speed and purpose that made the monsters hesitate. The first human hit the ground shooting Sergeant Kang. Minho put 3 rounds into the nearest Krath warrior before his boots touched the floor. The creature staggered, its armor cracked, its blood spraying the walls. He fired 3 more rounds. It fell. Clear. He shouted. Move, move, move. Behind him, 46 soldiers dropped through the hole. They spread out instantly, taking cover, finding targets, working together like parts of a single machine. Private Lee Soman went left. Corporal Bi Guillaume went right. Specialist Yuonji set up her machine gun and began to fire. The sound was deafening. The tunnel became a storm of bullets and screams. The Krath had conquered 100 worlds. They had never lost a ground battle. They were 3 meters tall, covered in natural armor, armed with weapons that could cut through steel. They had never fought humans before. Private Lee Soman took a plasma burn to her shoulder. The pain was enormous. She could smell her own flesh burning. She ignored it. She kept shooting. A Krath charged at her, scythe raised. She emptied her magazine into its face, dropped, rolled, reloaded, and kept fighting. Corporal Bi Jiang ran out of ammunition. A Krath slammed into her, throwing her against the wall. She felt ribs crack. She pulled her combat knife and drove it into the creature's eye. It screamed. She twisted the blade. It stopped screaming. Specialist Cho Yunji's machine gun overheated. She threw it at the nearest Krath, drew her pistol, and kept firing. When that was empty, she picked up a dead Krath scythe and used it against its former owners. The Valari watched in silence. They had never seen anything like this. Commander Lrus stood frozen as a human soldier, bleeding from a dozen wounds, dragged himself toward a Krath that was about to kill a Valari child. The soldier had no weapon. He had no strength left, but he threw himself onto the monster anyway, wrapping his arms around its leg, holding it back just long enough for another human to shoot it down. The soldier died with his arms still wrapped around the creature. He died protecting a child he had never met, from a species he had never known, on a world that was not his home. What are they? Taryn whispered. Lrus shook her head. She had no answer. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, 23 humans were dead. The tunnel floor was covered in Krath bodies. The survivors, wounded and exhausted, immediately began helping the Valari to their feet. Sergeant Kan Minho walked toward Lrus. His armor was cracked and scorched. Blood ran down his face from a cut above his eye. He looked like he had walked through hell. Commander Lrus? He asked. Yes, I am Commander Lrus. I am Sergeant Kan Minho, 77th Drop Infantry, United Earth Coalition. He smiled through the blood. We are here to take you home. Lrus stared at him. Your soldiers. They gave their lives for us. Yes. Why? You do not know us. We are strangers. We are not even the same species. Minho looked at her with eyes that held no doubt. You called for help. We came, but your people died. Some things are worth dying for. He looked around at the Valari survivors, at the children who were clinging to their parents, at the elderly who were too shocked to speak. Getting these people to safety is one of those things. Lrus felt something she did not understand. Her people had asked the entire galaxy for help. The great civilizations, the powerful empires, the advanced species with their fleets and armies, they had all said no. But these humans, from their tiny planet far away, had come running. I do not understand you, she admitted. Most species do not, Minho said. But you do not need to understand us, Commander. You just need to trust us. He held out his hand. "Can you do that?" Lrus looked at his hand, covered in blood, shaking with exhaustion. Offered in friendship, she took it. "Yes," she said. "I can." "Good. Now let us get your people out of here. We do not have much time." The evacuation began immediately. The surviving humans formed a protective ring around the Valari civilians. They moved through the tunnels slowly, carefully, always watching for danger. Every time they heard Krath forces approaching, soldiers would break off to hold them back while the others kept moving. Private Lee Soman, her shoulder wrapped in a hasty bandage, carried a Valari child on her back. The child was small, with large eyes that watched everything with quiet terror. Soman hummed an old song from Earth, trying to keep her calm. "What is that sound?" the child asked. "It is a song my mother used to sing to me," Soman answered. "When I was scared. Does it help?" "Sometimes." The child was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, she began to hum along. Corporal Beek Jiyong was at the rear of the group, covering their retreat. Her ribs screamed with every breath. Her knife was gone, buried in a Krath somewhere behind them. But she kept moving. She kept fighting. Because that was what humans did. They reached the extraction point as the sun was setting. A shuttle from the Indomitable was waiting, its engines running. The pilot, a young man named Oh Yeho, was waving frantically from the cockpit. "Get in. Get in. We have got Krath fighters incoming." The Valari began to board. Children first. Then the elderly. Then everyone else. The humans stayed outside, forming a line, weapons ready. Sergeant Cam Minho was the last to board. He stood at the door as the shuttle lifted off, watching the burning planet fall away below them. Somewhere down there, the bodies of his soldiers lay among the rubble. Good men and women who would never see Earth again. "We will come back for them," he promised. "We will not leave them here." But he knew that was a promise for another day. Today, they had done something impossible. Today, they had saved 40,000 lives. And somewhere up above, the Indomitable was still fighting. Still burning. Still refusing to die. The shuttle climbed toward the stars. Behind them, the world burned. Ahead of them, a battle waited dot, but for the first time in 7 days, the Valari were no longer alone. They had humans now, and humans never gave up. Captain Park Doan stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and looked at death. 312 Krath warships filled the view screen. Each one was larger than his destroyer. Each one carried enough firepower to turn a moon into dust. They hung in orbit around the burning planet like sharks circling wounded prey. His ship had 52 crew members, 4 missile bays, 2 main guns, 1 chance. "Captain," said Lieutenant Yoon Hana from the tactical station. Her voice was calm, but her hands were tight on the console. "I am counting 312 hostile vessels. They outgun us by approximately 800 to 1. "Thank you, Lieutenant. I can see them. What are your orders, sir?" Dohan smiled. It was a small smile, tired but certain. "We go through them." The bridge fell silent. Every officer turned to look at their captain. Some thought he had lost his mind. Others understood exactly what he meant. "Sir," said the helmsman, a young man named Shin Tai-woo, "that is not possible." "Ensign, I have been in the Navy for 23 years. I have learned that possible is just a word people use when they do not want to try." He turned to face his crew. "There are 40,000 people down there. Children, families, people who called for help, and we are the only ones who answered. The consortium will not come. The syndicate will not come. If we turn around, those people will die, and no one in this galaxy will remember their names." He paused. The burning planet filled the view screen behind him. "I did not join the Navy to be safe. I joined because some things are worth dying for. If any of you disagree, I will not blame you. But I am taking this ship through that blockade, and I am bringing those people home." No one moved. No one spoke. Then Lieutenant Yoon stood from her station. "What are your targeting orders, Captain?" Do-hyun felt something warm in his chest. Pride. Love for these brave, foolish people who had chosen to follow him into hell. "Target the command vessel. Let them know we are here." Below decks, in the deployment bay, Sergeant Kan Minho was checking his rifle for the 10th time. Around him sat 46 soldiers of the 77th Drop Infantry. They were packed into the small space-like cargo, their armor scratched and worn from a dozen campaigns. They were the best soldiers Earth had ever produced, and they were about to jump into a nightmare. "Sergeant," said Private Lee Soman, a young woman with sharp eyes and steady hands, "what is the situation up there?" "Bad," Minho admitted. "Very bad." "How bad?" "About 300 enemy ships bad." The soldiers exchanged looks. Corporal Baek Ji-young laughed softly. She was a small woman, but Minho had seen her carry wounded soldiers twice her size across a battlefield. "So it is a normal Tuesday, something like that." Specialist Cho Yoonji, the squad's heavy weapons expert, was cleaning her machine gun with the calm focus of someone who had accepted their fate long ago. "What do we know about the ground situation?" "Thousands of enemy soldiers. 40,000 civilians trapped underground. A species called the Velari. They look like us, but with 3 eyes and 4 fingers. They have never been in a war before." "Never?" Soman looked surprised. "Never. They are artists and scientists. Peaceful people." Minho looked around at his soldiers. "That is why we are going down there. Because someone has to protect the people who cannot protect themselves." The ship shuddered. Alarms began to sound. Over the intercom, Captain Do-hyun's voice was calm and clear. "All hands, we are engaging the enemy. Drop team, prepare for deployment in 8 minutes." Minho stood and faced his soldiers. These were men and women he had trained with, fought with, bled with. Some of them would not survive the next hour. He owed them honesty. "I am not going to lie to you. This mission is dangerous. The odds are against us. Many of us will not come back." He paused. "But down there, on that planet, there are children who are scared and alone. There are parents who cannot protect their families. There are people who have lost everything and have no one left to help them." He put on his helmet and felt the locks click into place. "Today, we are their hope. Today, we show the galaxy what humans are made of. And today, if we die knowing we did the right thing." The soldiers rose as one. Rifles were loaded. Armor was sealed. Prayers were whispered above them. The battle had begun. The Indomitable fired everything it had. Missiles screamed through the void. Kinetic rounds tore through space at incredible speed. The Krath, who had conquered 100 worlds, who had never faced a species stupid enough to attack them, hesitated. That hesitation saved thousands of lives. Human weapons were simple: bullets, explosives, brute force. But they were effective in ways the Krath had never imagined. Their shields, designed to stop elegant energy beams, shattered under the impact of solid metal, traveling faster than anything they had ever encountered. The Indomitable punched through the first line of the blockade. Then the second. Krath ships exploded around it, their crews dying before they understood what was happening. On the bridge, Lieutenant Yoon worked 3 stations at once. Sweat ran down her face. Blood dripped from a cut on her forehead where a console had exploded. Hull breaches on decks 8, 9, and 12. Port engine is gone. Casualties on all levels. "Keep firing," Do-hyun ordered. All power to forward shields. Another hit. Another alarm. Another friend dying somewhere in the ship. But they were through. The planet filled the view screen. Burning cities. Smoke-choked skies. A world in its death throes. Drop zone in 30 seconds. Shouted the deployment officer Dot in the bay below. Sergeant Cam Minho took a deep breath. Around him, his soldiers made peace with their gods, their families, their own souls. The bay doors opened. Below them, hell waited. 77th Drop Infantry. Minho shouted, "On me!" And 47 humans fell from the sky. They dropped through fire and smoke. They dropped past burning buildings and fleeing civilians. They dropped into the heart of an alien war with nothing but their training, their weapons, and their stubborn human refusal to give up. Minho hit the ground hard, rolled, and came up with his rifle ready. Around him, his soldiers did the same. They had landed in a crater that might have been a park before the war. Now it was a graveyard. Sound off. He ordered. One by one, his soldiers reported in. All 47 had survived the drop dot above them. The Indomitable continued its impossible battle. Below them, the Valari waited for salvation. Dot between them stood an army of monsters. "Move out," Minho said. "We have work to do." The humans began to march toward the bunker, their boots crunching on broken glass and burned stone. Behind them, the sky burned. Ahead of them, the enemy waited Dot, and on 100 craft communication channels. Confused officers asked the same question. What were these strange, small creatures? And why were they not afraid? They would learn the answer soon enough. Humans were never afraid. Not when there were people to save. The sky had been burning for 7 days. Commander Lrus stood at the observation window of the underground bunker and watched another city die. The crystal towers of Thyssen, which had stood for 10,000 years, melted like ice under the Krath bombardment. Orange fire bloomed across the horizon. Black smoke rose to meet the dark ships that hung in the sky like patient vultures. She closed her 3 eyes and tried to remember what peace felt like. It seemed like a dream now. A beautiful, distant dream. "Commander," said Terran, her communications officer. His voice was weak. His 4-fingered hand shook as he worked the console. "The eastern shelters have gone silent." Lrus did not turn around. "How many?" 12,000. Mostly families. 12,000 more, added to the millions already lost. The Valari had been a peaceful species. They had art and music and poetry. They had built floating gardens that could be seen from space. They had never needed weapons because they had never had enemies. Then the Krath came. The Krath, Dominion had existed for 8,000 years. They moved from world to world, system to system, harvesting everything they found. They did not conquer. They did not negotiate. They simply took what they wanted and destroyed the rest. Dozens of species had disappeared into their ships, never to be seen again. Now it was the Valari's turn. Lrus finally turned from the window. The bunker was crowded with survivors. Old scholars sat in corners, staring at nothing. Young mothers held crying children. Artists who had never seen violence in their lives now wore the blank faces of the hopeless. There were perhaps 40,000 Valari left on all of Thyssen. 40,000 out of 12 billion. "Have we received any response to our distress signal?" Lrus asked. Terran's silence was answer enough. "The consortium?" She pressed. "They say the Krath fleet is too large. They cannot risk open war. The Syndicate worlds? They have closed their borders. They do not want to attract Krath attention." Lrus laughed. It was a bitter, broken sound. "So we are alone." "Yes, Commander. We are alone." She had known this would be the answer. The galaxy was full of species who had learned the same lesson over thousands of years. Survival meant not getting involved. Survival meant looking away when your neighbors screamed. Survival meant pretending you could not hear the sounds of worlds dying. The Valari had believed they were different. They had believed in friendship and alliance and mutual protection. They had been fools. A violent shake ran through the bunker. Dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere above, the Krath ground forces were getting closer. Their soldiers were nightmares made real. 3 meters tall, covered in black armor that was actually their own hardened skin, carrying plasma size that could cut through steel like paper. They did not feel pain. They did not feel fear. They did not stop until everything was dead. "They have found us," Terran said quietly. Lrus looked around the bunker. At the children hiding behind their parents. At the elderly who had lived full lives and now faced ending them in terror. At the young ones who would never have the chance to fall in love or create art or see another sunrise. She had failed them all. "Prepare the final defense," she ordered. "Everyone who can hold a tool, arm them. We will make the Krath pay for every step they take." It was a meaningless gesture. She knew that. Her people were not warriors. They would be cut down in seconds. But she could not simply stand and wait for death. That was not who she was. The bunker's defenders took their positions. Engineers with cutting torches. Workers with metal pipes. Teachers with nothing but their bare hands. They formed a line at the main entrance and waited for the end. Lrus took her place at the front. If her people were going to die, she would die first. The first explosion hit the outer door. Then another. Then another. The metal began to glow red from the plasma cutters working on the other side. Lrus closed her eyes and thought of her home. The garden where she had played as a child. The schools where she had learned. The friends she had lost. The world she had failed to protect. "Commander." Terran's voice cut through her thoughts. "Commander, you need to hear this." She opened her eyes. Terran was staring at his console with an expression she did not understand. It took her a moment to recognize it. She had not seen it in 7 days. Hope. What is it? She demanded. "A signal. A response to our distress call. Someone is coming." Lrus pushed through the crowd to reach the console. On the screen, a simple text message blinked in a language the translator struggled to process. When it finally resolved, the words made no sense. "Valari survivors, this is Captain Park Do-hyun of the United Earth Coalition vessel Indomitable. We received your distress call. Hold your position. We are coming to help. Ada, 14 minutes. Humans?" Lrus whispered. She knew of them. Every species in the galaxy knew of them, though few had met them. A young species from a small planet in the outer rim. They had only achieved spaceflight a few centuries ago. They did not have faster-than-light communication. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards. They were loud, emotional, irrational, and short-lived. They were also very far away. "This is impossible," Lrus said. "How did they receive our signal? How are they here?" Terran shook his head. "I do not know. But Commander, look at this." He pulled up the sensor data. A single ship had just entered the system. It was small. Tiny, really, compared to the Krath fleet. It was flying on what appeared to be chemical engines. Its weapons were primitive kinetic systems. Compared to the 300 Krath vessels in orbit, it was nothing. An insect flying toward a furnace, and it was heading straight for the blockade. "They will be destroyed," Lrus said. "Yes," Terran agreed. "They must know that. Yet they are not stopping. Why? Why would they throw their lives away for strangers?" Terran had no answer. Above them, the Krath continued cutting through the door. Below them, the ground shook with distant explosions. Around them, 40,000 Valari waited to die. But now they waited with something they had not felt in 7 days. They waited with hope. Lrus looked at the blinking dot on the sensor display. One small human ship against an empire of death. It was madness. It was suicide. It made no logical sense, and yet she found herself smiling. Hold the line, she told her people. Help is coming. She did not know if she believed it. She did not know if they had any real chance. But for the first time since the sky started burning, Commander Lrus allowed herself to imagine a tomorrow. 14 minutes. That was all they had to survive. 14 minutes until the humans arrived.